that we do on the fourth Thursday every month. And today we are focusing on a very, very important topic, which is the important role of faith communities in the process, the vision of creating an ecological civilization. And we are just incredibly blessed to have today as our guest, our featured speakers, Audrey Kitagawa and David Korten, who are both members of the Living Earth Movement organizing team. They've both been advocates for ecological civilization, equitable economies, and just societies for decades. David is a renowned speaker and writer and known for his many influential books that include When Corporations Rule the World and The Great Turning. And Audrey is known across the world for her work for interreligious cooperation, working at the United Nations in her former role as leader of the Parliament of World Religions, and currently as leader in the G20 Interfaith Forum, and as the president of the International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation. And so this is just going to be an amazing presentation, and we're going to follow it up with a really deep and powerful discussion, I am sure. We have over 100 people on Zoom today, so I really look forward to having a lot of really great conversation after the presentations. We'll have a very short announcement right after the presentations from John Cobb and Bonnie Tarwater about an upcoming gathering in August, on August 25th. So without further ado, Audrey, would you please take it away?
Thank you so much, Jeff, and good afternoon, everyone from New York City. My deepest appreciation to the Living Earth movement for this invitation to share about an ecological civilization, the important role of faith communities. It is really wonderful to be with all of you who are tuning into this broadcast with Jeff Wells, our moderator, and David Korten, a co-conversationalist with me this afternoon. Before proceeding further, I would like to acknowledge the passing 2 days ago at 103 years of age, Dr. James Lovecock, may he rest in peace, an ecologist and one of our giants in climate change and the environment, who created the Gaia theory, which indicates that the Earth is a living organism that functions with a complex, self-regulating system that creates and maintains the conditions for life on the planet. We express our gratitude and remembrance of him. I have been a great admirer of David Korten's work for many years and found his seminal best-selling book, as mentioned by Jeff, When Corporations Rule the World, a must-read classic. His analysis of the power of transnational corporations and its long arms into the power of recesses of our governments and its policies and our daily lives is one of the most comprehensive, clear, and precise treatises of its kind that helped to launch a new Earth movement. We can also see the power of the transnational corporations in the extractive industries that have left the environment polluted for some of the world's poorest people, which live in countries that have some of the world's richest and most coveted natural resources, such as gold, coltan, copper, oil, platinum, diamonds, and the like. I highly recommend this book to all of you. It is more relevant and prescient than ever in its over 22 years of being in print with addenda, as we see the very things David posited coming to pass with ever greater consequences upon our world and its inhabitants. Archbishop Desmond Tutu called this book a searing indictment of an unjust international economic order. We are all aware of the warnings which have been given over many years by climate scientists who spoke about the perils of global warming, the emission of carbon pollution in the air, and the pressing need for countries to cooperate with each other to help save our environment, which has now been placed in such jeopardy with the loss of hundreds of species becoming extinct every day and the massive takedown of our rainforests, notably in the Amazon, and now in the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC for short, where the president of that country has opened up the rainforests for the extraction of oil. The president of the DRC said, "Our priority is not to save the planet." Of course, human beings are a species too, so we have become acutely aware that we face a grave existential threat to our own ability to survive if this environmental degradation is not corrected. The Living Earth movement began out of this concern, and John Cobb, we are very privileged to have with us today, is the inspirational spark behind this movement. And he wrote a letter to the heads of state of the United States and China, two of the most economically powerful, as well as the two greatest environmental polluters, to come together to address environmental concerns in the hopes of enhancing a reversal of the trajectory of accelerated extinction that we are careening toward. We have to address this global concerns and issues, and we also recognize the importance of state leaders and state action to do just that, address global concerns and issues. And we all recognize this component as indispensable to the creation of our sense of well-being and security for the benefit of not only the citizens of our respective countries, but of all people everywhere. I also call our attention to another indispensable component of global well-being and security for all of life on this earth, and that is each and every one of us. We are the individuals who collectively comprise civil society. We are finding our ability and efficaciousness to grow movements that will create the tipping point for global transformation to help save our planet. There are many individuals and groups coming together to address our environmental concerns, and I want to especially call out the important and inspiring role of faith communities in meeting this global challenge. While distinctions may be drawn between religious institutions and faith communities, for many, these distinctions are not made and may even be considered synonymous. If any distinctions are made, the word community means a locally associated group of people who belong to a faith tradition that may or may not arise out of an affiliated religious institution. I also acknowledge that there are many faith communities that are outside of mainstream religious institutions, but are nonetheless implementing mindful practices to contribute to alleviating our environmental degradation. To show the vibrant participation of religious leaders, institutions, and faith communities, I begin with the declarations on the environment, which several faith traditions have created to acknowledge the importance of caring for our environment. Laudato Si, a 184-page encyclical by Pope Francis, calls for the mitigation of climate change that will reach more than 1 billion Catholic adherents around the world and finds its foundations in the concept of integral ecology, which include response to the cry of the earth, response to the cry of the poor, ecological economics, adoption of simple lifestyles, ecological education, ecological spirituality, an emphasis on community involvement and participatory action. Integral ecology affirms that humans are part of a broader world and calls for comprehensive solutions which consider the interactions within natural systems themselves and with social systems. While the study of ecosystems has become well known in the science of ecology, integral ecology expands this paradigm to consider the ethical and spiritual dimensions of how humans are meant to relate to each other and the natural world, drawing on culture, family, community, virtue, religion, and respect for the common good. The application of integral ecology to political life calls for international agreements to protect the environment and assist low-income countries, new national and local policies, inclusive and transparent decision-making, and an economy ordered for the common good of all. Our religious organizations, which have issued declarations on the environment, are the Rabbinic Letter on Climate Crisis, signed by over 300 rabbis, calling for action against climate disruption. The Statement of Faith and Spiritual Leaders, issued by the World Council of Churches, which calls for 1, a global agreement applicable to all countries, 2, nationally binding commitments, and 3, commitment by faith and spiritual leaders. The Islamic Declaration on Global Climate Change was a faith-based collective call of Islamic environmentalism to combat and tackle climate change, addressed to Muslims all over the world, of which there are over 1.8 billion or more adherents, who comprise approximately 24% of the world population. Islam is the official religion in 26 countries in Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, and the Middle East. The Islamic Climate Change Declaration iterates a call to reject human greed for natural resources, have respect for perfect equilibrium of nature, and focus on the need for recognition of the moral obligation towards conservation. The Hindu Declaration on Climate Change is a global call to 900 million Hindus to lead lives in harmony with the natural world, and makes an appeal to world leaders to find lasting solutions. The time to act is now. A Buddhist declaration on climate change was issued by Buddhist leaders, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama and now deceased Buddhist master Thich Nhat Hanh, calling on world leaders to reach an ambitious and effective climate agreement. Time does not allow me, unfortunately, to go into more detail about these declarations. However, they demonstrate a recognition by religious leaders who represent large constituencies of religious communities around the world that the environment and climate change are at the forefront of their concerns. Some of the work of environmentalists have also focused on uplifting marginalized communities and indigenous peoples. Climate change is disproportionately affecting people at society's margins. Religious and faith organizations have always prioritized helping the poor and vulnerable and addressing social injustices. Among the most vulnerable are indigenous communities, a problem that ultimately harms all of us and the earth itself. The spiritual connections of indigenous peoples with the earth have safeguarded nature and enhanced human well-being for many, many eons. They are also known as the guardians of the rainforests. Their lives have been threatened and several killed for their protection efforts. By marginalizing indigenous communities, we are preventing valuable knowledge and practices from being utilized and severely compromising the health of our planet. Recognizing religious institutions' dark colonial past, many religious groups are working with local and indigenous people on solutions to climate change. At international conferences that help to shape the world's response, religious representatives have fostered equal partnerships between religious and indigenous leaders on nature and the climate. For example, at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in 2021, religious groups organized a forum to advance that effort, calling it Making Peace with Nature, heeding the call of indigenous peoples. The power of indigenous wisdom to transform our current situation can be seen in the recent granting of legal rights to rivers. The Maori of New Zealand have a spiritual connection to rivers, and the Wanganui River, for example, has always had profound spiritual significance to the Wanganui tribes. It is more than a waterway. It is seen as sacred, a source of spiritual sustenance and renewal. A well-known proverb says, "I am the river is me." In 2017, the Wanganui River became the first river in the world to be considered a legal person. It can now be represented in court and has 2 guardians appointed to speak on its behalf. This monumental victory took more than 160 years to fight as one of New Zealand's longest-running court cases, and it has really had significant global influence. The Magpie River in Canada, the Amazon, the Klamath River in the United States, and all rivers in Bangladesh are examples of rivers that have since gained personhood, demonstrating the power of Indigenous knowledge and advocacy to make substantial environmental changes. The settlement legislation recognizes a living and indivisible whole, comprising the Wanganui River from the mountains to the sea, incorporating its tributaries and all its physical and metaphysical elements. For the first time, a framework stems from the intrinsic spiritual values of an Indigenous belief system. Now let us examine how interfaith collaboration has been instrumental in environmental efforts. The United Nations noted that from Buddhism to Christianity to Hinduism to Islam, various faiths acknowledge the need for environmental stewardship, and their holy texts urge adherents to be caretakers of the earth and its biodiversity. With shared values of respecting, protecting, and honoring the earth, and the ability to mobilize and inspire their communities, faith leaders and organizations have taken action to open the dialogue about environmental protection and policy. I will name specific initiatives, but we must know that there are thousands more which are working tirelessly to advocate for our environment. There is the Worldwide Wildlife Fund's Sacred Earth Program, a program that partners with religious leaders and institutions to help shape sustainable decision-making in their communities. Green Faith is an interfaith coalition that is building a worldwide multi-faith climate and environmental movement. It envisions humanity as having a shared reverence for life on earth and a world in which religious and spiritual communities generate a moral awakening to the sacredness of earth and the dignity of all people. Green Faith has supported faith-based fossil fuel divestment campaigns, and more than 130 religious institutions with assets of over $24 billion have committed to full or partial fossil fuel divestment. Faith for Earth initiative was established by the United Nations Environment Program in 2017. And it focuses on 3 overarching goals. 1 is empowering leadership, 2 is mobilizing faith-based investments, and 3, providing faith science evidence. The initiative explores various theological views on the world's religions toward the environment, demonstrating the connection between faith and nature. Faith for Earth also recognizes that participation and leadership of women are vital. The Interfaith Rainforest Initiative is a successful multi-faith alliance that brings moral urgency and faith-based leadership to the global effort to end tropical deforestation. It was launched in 2017 and adopted and endorsed in 2019 at the 10th Religions for Peace World Assembly, where over 900 religious leaders agreed to restore the planet's rainforests. It provides a global platform for religious leaders, Indigenous peoples, governments, civil society organizations and actors, and businesses to work together to protect rainforests and safeguard the Indigenous peoples who serve as their guardians. It also has toolkits for advocacy and action that communities of faith can undertake to help save our rainforests by recommending things that we can implement in our daily lives, such as cutting down on food wastage, moving to a more plant-based diet, and other such practical recommendations that can be incorporated in our daily lives. The Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology, for short, is a database on religious engagement on the environment. FOR publishes books, articles, and newsletters on initiatives led by different religious traditions and is an international, multi-religious project that promotes the moral force of religious environmentalism. FOR identifies ecological and justice perspectives in the scriptures, rituals, contemplative practices, and moral and ethical commitments of the world's religions to find collaborative solutions to the global economic crisis. To this end, FOR partners with scientists and policymakers and dialogues with religious spiritual communities. FOR's vision is a flourishing earth community where religious and spiritual traditions join together for the shared well-being of ecosystems, life forms, and people on our common planetary home. Communities of faith that are creating interfaith coalitions are proving themselves to be effective participants in the quest to stop environmental degradation and harm. They share many of the same concerns over global challenges and are seeking solutions founded on their shared goals, values, and ethics. Religious and faith communities have the ability to touch the hearts of millions of adherents and those within their respective communities to mobilize for effective change. The collaborative and cooperative efforts of the world's religions and faith communities that have joined together in the many interfaith groups are creating change through the persistent efforts of many individuals from many faith traditions. The goal of interfaith coalitions is not a fusion or uniting of religions, but finding alignment in the splendor of our diversity and coming together to create global movements for positive transformation to make our one Earth home healthy, because our very existence depends upon a healthy, vibrant, and thriving Earth. As we continue to explore and analyze not only the past, present, and future possibilities, as we exist within the infinite power of our own potentiality to create positive change, let us recall the sublime words of Ruby, who wrote about his encounter with a silkworm. And he said, "I stood before a silkworm one day, and that night my heart said to me, I can do things like that. I can spin skies. I can be woven into love that can bring warmth to people. I can be soft against a crying face. I can be wings that lift, and I can travel on my 1,000 feet throughout the earth, my sacks filled with the sacred." And I replied to my heart, "Dear, can you really do all those things?" And it just nodded, yes, in silence. So we began and will never cease. How beautiful to see our potentiality. That one silkworm to reflect upon our own lives that can inspire, reach the heavens, be the weavers of love and stories of love that can soothe pain, and to dance upon the earth as sacred beings of love, compassion, kindness, and loving and caring for each other and our one common home. Thank you so much, everyone, for this privilege to share with all of you. And I really look forward to hearing from David Korten, one of the great thinkers and writers in contemporary times. We are most fortunate to have him with us today. He has also spoken extensively about what an ecological civilization is and the importance of mobilizing behind its creation, that especially calls for the participation of all civil society actors in placing the control within local communities to create a copacetic relationship with the environment in which they live. I look forward to hearing his words of wisdom, not only as a trained economist, but as a man on a journey of self-discovery into the greater meaning and purpose of life that has led him ever more closely to the importance of faith and the deep values they articulate within this immense, infinite, and complex creation story that is ever revealing itself without end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you.
David, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And thank you, Audrey. Wow, things can get so discouraging in this time, and you have such a message of hope and inspiration. It's a total delight to be joining you and Jeff and the rest of this amazing group in the discussion of the role of faith communities in creating an ecological civilization. I was actually, I thought we were going to start this off as a discussion of religious institutions and their role, and the two of you sort of educated me to the sense of the distinction between our formal institutions as contrasted to communities of spiritually engaged communities, which I think fits very well with my deeper understanding as we look at the challenges of moving to bringing forth an ecological civilization. That the leadership is going to be coming from much more within civil society than from within our structure, our formal structures of our formal institutions of government, business, religion, education, and so forth. But to get into kind of how I see the larger challenge of the shift to an ecological civilization, we start with the reality that never in human history have we faced comparable opportunity born of comparable terminal crisis. Science, as you all well know, tells us we have less than a decade to achieve significant reduction in global carbon emissions. If we fail, we risk irreversible environmental disruption that may render Earth unlivable by humans and many other species. We get near daily reports of unprecedented storms, droughts, wildfires, and floods, confirming that scientific consensus. Meanwhile, the COVID pandemic has disrupted almost every aspect of daily life. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine reminds us of the unconscionable and pointless suffering warfare imposes on us all. And the institutions of corporate monopoly that drive and profit from the devastation continue to grow the wealth and power of the world's richest billionaires. So this is our time as the human species to rethink and regroup with a unified global commitment to the well-being of the living Earth and all its people. And it's now within our means to create a world of peace, beauty, material sufficiency, and spiritual abundance for all. An obviously preferable future aligned with the vision of the world's great spiritual teachers. This beautiful vision would be an impossible mission except for our now proven human capacity to transform on a global scale with ever increasing speed. Hope lies in our rapidly growing awareness that our current path leads to a world with no winners. Or to put it more bluntly, a path to a dead Earth with no humans. We humans are a complex choice-making species with extraordinary physical and intellectual abilities. And we have a deep desire and need to connect with one another and the rest of the living world of which we are a part. But we're in crisis because we've been lured into a collective, self-destructive, competitive quest to dominate and exploit one another and Earth in the individualistic pursuit of money. The resulting greed and violence have become so commonplace that we assume these perversions are inherent in our human nature. Yet we know we are capable of so much more. If we reflect on what gives us true satisfaction in life, we realize that creating the world we truly want requires giving up only that by which we dehumanize ourselves, and by which we strip our children of hope for a viable future. For example, war, wasteful obsessive consumption, financial speculation, advertising for things we don't need, dependence on cars for daily routines. This is our human time to rediscover truths we already know and to reclaim what makes us truly human. Life is matter possessed of the capacity to choose as it creates and maintains the conditions essential to life's existence. Start with a living organism with which we are most intimately familiar, our body, the vessel of our consciousness and the instrument of our agency. New technologies have only very recently given us the ability to observe the extraordinary nature and dynamic of the human body's inner workings. We now know that each human body is a self-organizing community of tens of trillions of independent, decision-making, regenerating living cells and microorganisms. These interrelated cells and microorganisms are engaged in a continuous self-managed exchange of nutrients, water, energy, and information. Then you go through the hierarchy, we come to Earth as a vastly larger and more complex living being. Yet like any multi-celled organism, living Earth survives and thrives only so long as its countless individual organisms self-organize to create and maintain the conditions together of climate, pure water and air, fertile soil, and countless other conditions on which Earth's community of life depends. And without the constant labor of Earth's community of life, Earth would be just another dead rock floating in space. And we would not experience the miracle of life. And if any aspect of this internal and external interdependence suffers serious disruption, we die. Complex organisms like humans and Earth self-organize at multiple levels. At the lowest levels internal to our body, each cell organizes its internal flows of nutrients, water, energy, and information to maintain itself while engaging in continuous exchange with neighboring cells to meet their needs. It's breathtakingly complex. Because continuous local adaptation is essential, the processes involved are bottom-up. Success depends on each individual cell and organ recognizing its dependence on and responsibility to and for the well-being of the whole. Wow. Our individual human mind has little or no awareness of our body's internal self-organizing processes, though our body's organs have their way of letting us know when they need us to provide them food, drink, and exercise, maintain a comfortable temperature, and facilitate elimination and disposal of waste. None of the body's self-organizing processes involve any equivalent of the tokens of exchange we humans call money. Nor is making money ever their purpose. The more we humans focus on competing for money and jobs, and the less we cooperate to reclaim that which makes us human, democratizes power, and advances the well-being of all. The competitive violence and exploitation will not get us to cooperative peace and sharing. Our future depends on embracing a basic truth recognized by our early ancestors and now affirmed by the leading edge of science. South Africans know it as Ubuntu, which translates, I am because you are. Wow, such depth of insight in just 5 words. I am because you are. The implications are simple and profound. I depend on you, and we all do best when we all do well. This truth leads us from asking, how can I make a difference? to how can we make a difference. For society, it means we all lose when it's about my money. We all win when it's about our well-being. The Earth Charter is my favorite current statement of guiding principles for an ecological civilization. It concludes with this simple yet profound truth. The choice, this is a quote, the choice is ours. Form a global partnership to care for Earth and one another, or risk the destruction of ourselves and the diversity of life. Fundamental changes are needed in our values, institutions, and ways of living. We must realize that when basic needs have been met, human development is primarily about being more, not having more, unquote. Now, most of the world's religions call us to love and care for our neighbors and all that the eternal spirit has created. The frontiers of science now give us ever-deepening understanding of the interdependence of life. Quantum physics tells us that relationships, not particles, are the foundation of what we experience as material reality. Biology is finding that intelligent life exists only in diverse communities of choice-making organisms that together maintain the conditions essential to their individual and collective existence. And the social sciences find that humans get their greatest satisfaction from mutually caring relationships with other living beings. We all do better together. Far from calling us to sacrifice for the well-being of Earth, we are called to embrace our current challenges as a win-win opportunity to actualize our human desire to love and to care for one another and Earth. The societal implications run deep and require broad global consensus on reframing how we, as a now global species, address purpose, power, and our own procreation. The purpose of our now global human society is to provide all people with material sufficiency and spiritual abundance while supporting the well-being, beauty, and creative unfolding of Earth's community of life. If we meet our well-being targets, whether a meaningless statistic like GDP is going up or down should be irrelevant. Now, societies best fulfill this purpose when power resides in self-reliant communities of place that manage their communities' processes of procreation and regeneration to maintain the health and balance of both human and non-human populations. This includes voluntary self-management of human reproduction to assure that every child is a wanted child who benefits from the care of a loving family and community dedicated to their full development and actualization of their full human potential. Unfortunately, fertility control is a natural outcome when women are provided with education, attractive employment opportunities, and the means to control their reproduction. Well-being is the goal. Empowered, self-organizing communities are the means. What we humans have created, we can change. We now need rapid and dramatic changes grounded in deep ethical sensibility. Can we achieve that change within the time available? We will know only if we try. My attention has long focused on the failures of modern institutions, especially the institutions of business and government. But the failures also trace to our institutions of religion, the institutions to which we turn for the moral guidance of which we are now in great need. Yet our religious institutions are generally failing to provide. Now, Audrey, you suggested, along with Jeff, that hope lies with faith communities, which I gather in a way you distinguish from formal religious institutions. It seems a subtle but very important distinction that I hope you may elaborate as we further carry this discussion forward. But just as we cannot look to our most powerful institutions of business and government for leadership in dealing with the crisis for which they bear major responsibility, it seems that neither can we look to our institutions of religion, and for much the same reason that the institutions of business and government fail. All are structured to give power to a very few at the top who predominantly use that power for their own personal gain. Generally, the words of our most venerated spiritual prophets carried a beneficial and unifying message of peace, love, inclusion, and sharing. The religious institutions that followed them, however, have too often been instruments of brutal competition for power. Jesus was a prophet of unconditional love, peace, and caring. But the institution of the Catholic Church claimed to represent him. It, however, assured both Romans and those they conquered and exploited that the Holy Roman Empire acted in God's name in service to God's will. The institution of the competing sects of Christianity that followed became instruments of Europe's colonization and enslavement of Africa, Latin America, and Asia. But imperial agendas of religious institutions were not limited to Christianity. The institutions of Hinduism and Islam played their role in the violent and displacement that followed India's liberation from British rule and led to the creation of the three competing nation states of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Judaism led the violent confiscation of the lands of Islamic Palestine to create the state of Israel in seemingly perpetual warfare between Israel and Palestine. In current day United States, the religious institutions of conservative evangelicals are tearing the country apart with their support for interests of the gun and carbon fuels industries. In their effort to strip women of control of their own bodies, they align with capitalism's interest in assuring a supply of cheap and desperate labor. Bottom line, we cannot look for positive leadership from formal religious institutions in creating a world of peace, sharing, and environmental health any more than we can look to our most powerful institutions of business and government. There are many wonderful, caring people involved in religious institutions, as there are in business and government, but the institutional structures secure the power and short-term interests of the most predatory of power holders in disregard of the well-being of the living people of a living earth. The issues build from, but go far beyond the insights and messages of religious prophets who lived and taught thousands of years before the instruments of contemporary science penetrated the mysteries and grandeur of the ever-expanding and evolving cosmos and the inner workings of living bodies. Our best understanding of the nature and purpose of creation comes from observing how creation unfolds toward ever greater complexity, beauty, awareness, and possibility. Other instruments give us the ability to observe life's previously invisible inner workings, to deepen our understanding and appreciation of the complexity of life's inherent interdependence and the reasons why love and mutual care, even among microbes, is not just a good idea. It is essential to life's existence. Our future depends on integrating the wisdom of ancient prophets with the emerging new understanding of creation life and our distinctive human place in and contribution to creation's continued unfolding. Our future viability as a species depends on our ability to reshape our relationships with one another and Earth through ethically grounded choices relating to culture, institutions, technology, and infrastructure consistent with the well-being of all people and the living earth that birthed and nurtures us. Institutions that encourage competition for power over others are ill-equipped to lead us to a world of caring, sharing, materially self-reliant communities committed to the well-being of all. A viable human future will require the commitment of billions of people working and learning together in partnership with one another and Earth. Collaborative, self-organizing faith communities of spiritual seekers learning together have an essential role in organizing conversations and interventions, advancing mutual understanding of and well-being of life within the unfolding of creation. Together, we can deepen our awareness of our human nature, purpose, and responsibilities as living beings with a capacity to choose our common future with conscious collective intention. So, Jeff and Audrey, I turn it back to you.
All right, thank you so much, David. And I want to share the same comment about your presentation that you shared with Audrey, which is that it was very inspiring and provides us with, I think, a deep basis for hope that we can move in the direction of an ecological civilization if we all move in that direction together. I would just say, for my own part, that I resonated with the idea that we need to do this mainly from the bottom up and not the top down. That it's the transformation of religions and the role of faith in creating an ecological civilization, I think, is going to come primarily from local communities, just like ecological civilization itself will arise primarily from the local level and not from the top down. But I want to just ask both Audrey and David if based on the presentations that you've shared, if either of you have comments that you would like to make about one another's presentations or engage in some dialogue before we enter into the time of questions and answers and comments for the whole group.
What can I say, Jeff? I'm a big fan of David Korten's. And I don't dispute anything that he said. And of course, if we were to look at the histories of not only state actors and state governments in the past, as well as in contemporary times, as well as religious institutions, it can be very depressing indeed. It is not a history that we can deny. Yeah. But the question before us becomes, so with that understanding, what can we do now? Because the eternal moment is ever in the here and now. And in this eternal moment is the infinite opportunity as we stand in the infinite field of possibilities to create the future, the present and the future that we are seeking. And I have to say that the advocacy and awareness that has been ongoing, for example, since the Black Lives Matter movement, since the Me Too movement, since so many movements that have been sparked by civil society actors, we also see that it has left great impressions upon not only our religious institutions, but our academic institutions that have had slave histories and are trying to address, the wrongs committed in their histories through reparative justice. And I speak about my own university and alma mater that now proclaims that it is built and sitting on indigenous people's land, and that is the University of Southern California. And it recently provided and conferred the degrees that it withheld from the Japanese Americans who were interned during World War II. We also see that the Pope has made an apology for the residential schools that have virtually committed genocide, cultural genocide, and genocide against the children who they were tasked to be in their care. And this apology was made recently. So it is a recognition that of the past and the heinous injustices of the past, and the many ways that faith communities, our institutions, our governments are trying to address the wrongs and to move forward on better footing and to explore the ways in which we can acknowledge the harm that has been caused. The important thing for all institutions, as well as for each and every one of us, is not only to have this awareness, but to see how we must continuously address these issues of justice and to remedy all wrongs, because our conscience ultimately calls us to do that. And we see that the moral and ethical refinements that are being given by not only individuals and civil society actors, but institutions as well, are really very, very inspiring for us to consider. And that's not to say that the end of the story is here, but that we continue to explore and expand the boundaries of our injustices so that we can ultimately realize that every moment that we live is an opportunity to conduct reparative justice in all that we do, in our thoughts, in our speech, and in our actions individually and collectively. So thank you.
Thanks, Audrey. David?
Yeah. I've looked at this particular session as an opportunity primarily to learn from you and Audrey, based on a sense that the issues of ethics, of faith, but really which are the questions, our deepest questions about, in a sense, why are we here? What is this whole thing that we're experiencing, which is so extraordinary, and yet we have no idea really where we come from or where we're going to. But wow, I mean, these are the questions that we look to religion to answer for us. And getting our answers right seems to be so extraordinarily important at this particular time in our experience, because we've been so misled by the institutions of economics and the teachings of economics that it's really all about money. And we're here to make money, and the more money we make, the better off we all are, and everything's going to be fabulous, and we won't have to do any work. We just enjoy consumption, which from any deeper level of spirit, of creation of our reality is not only nonsense, it's madness. Which to my mind means that, the key to finding our way to the future that is within our means, it depends on getting our stories right. And I'm inclined here to bring in one of the most extraordinary awakenings for me. I used to be quite close to Marcus Borg, Christian theologian, whose defining comment, to my mind, his defining observation was, "Tell me your image of God and I will tell you your politics." It took me a while to figure out what he was saying. But once you get it, it's incredibly powerful. That one image of God, just incidentally, kind of is an old white guy with a kind of a beard. He looks kind of like me. You kind of wonder, where the hell did that image come from? Can you imagine who could come up with such an image? But that puts everything in a hierarchy. And so you've got God up here, and then who's the closest to God? Well, I don't know, is that the Pope or the Emperor? But it's a whole top-down framing. Now, the other image of God is not really of what we normally think of as a God, but it is the Spirit, the eternal Spirit. It's the source of the Big Bang, the energy, the Spirit, the something that was behind all of creation, from which, by what science tells us, all creation burst forth. And everything that we now know was ultimately an unfolding of that force. Now, that's not a top-down force. And I don't know, the only thing that makes sense to me is I understand the unfolding toward ever greater complexity, beauty, awareness, and possibility. It's a spirit bursting forth to learn from becoming what its potentials are, what its possibilities are, and that all of the pieces that we are all part of, we're all part of contributing to that, which then puts us into the framework of wow, we humans seem to have a lot of special capabilities. You know, we can speak of life as matter with the capacity to choose, but among all of the living things that we know, our capacity to choose and our power over Earth and over other beings is absolutely extraordinary, but so badly misused that we also have to wonder, is Earth mobilizing to get rid of us so that it can recover? Anyhow, these are the questions that I look to for answers from religion. I find almost nothing in any religious text that is the slightest help in that level of understanding. And yet, these are the issues of faith, and these are the questions that I believe our most forward-looking faith communities are asking. And the places where we get together to learn together, drawing from every possible source of human understanding. And they are our hope to discover not only the nature and purpose of creation, but also our place in it and how we can be contributors rather than the disruptors we currently are. So with that, back to you, Jeff.
Thank you. Very, very, very powerful expansions on your original comments, which I think are going to provoke a lot of conversation here and beyond this time together. I wish we had time to go really in depth into what you just said, David. Maybe we'll do another session on that in the future, just on sort of how do we create a new ethics for ecological civilization. But I'm going to take this opportunity right now to just promote what I have found to be a very helpful conversation about that. A book by Larry Rasmussen, who is a professor emeritus of Christian social ethics at Union Theological Seminary, and the book is called Earth Honoring Faith: Religious Ethics in a New Key. So if you haven't read that, I really recommend to anyone who's interested in pursuing ideas around that. He not only provides a really foundational description and diagnosis of how we got into the situation that we're in, but then says, here's the ethic that we need to get out of it. So I highly recommend that. And I just want to add, in response to Audrey's comments more than yours, David, that I think it's really important for us not to see this distinction between religious institutions and faith communities as an either-or situation, that we do need to continue to press the leadership of religious institutions to take the steps necessary to influence governments and business at the same time that we're having conversations and teaching within local faith communities about the ecological civilization and the ecological crisis and how do we respond to it, which is something that I've been doing a lot in my own congregation in New York City, the Church of the Village. I know Bonnie's been doing that within the Church of Our Common Home in Oregon, and many other local communities that I know of are really taking up this really important conversation, but also not just talking about it or teaching about it in their communities, but actually getting their communities to take action, to advocate for legislation at the state and local levels, or for policy changes and so forth that can contribute to moving us in the right direction. David.
Yeah, just a very quick comment on this. Basically all our major institutions are failing, and they all need deep transformation. So I absolutely agree with you. It's not that we do away with religion, just like we can't do away with government, we can't do away with business, but they need to be fundamentally transformed, and that's part of our challenge.
Yeah, very much so. I think part of my skepticism about the religious institutions comes with my experience from my own denomination, the United Methodist Church, which has very good statements about care for the creation and environmental degradation and all of that on paper. But I do not see the leadership of the denomination doing anything to actually put those words into action. And I think that a lot of denominations, religious institutions have the same problem. They have made great statements, but they do not really put them into action in influencing business and government and public policy. So, but I want to, before we get into the opening up the conversation, I want to invite Bonnie Tarwater and John Cobb to talk just a little bit for a couple minutes about a new curriculum that they have created or are in the process of creating, which is addressed primarily to Christian communities, but could possibly be adapted for other communities as well, to teach exactly about this, about ecological civilization, the ideas around that, and how we can respond to the ecological crisis.
Well, I'm appreciative of the attention that the paper that I wrote is getting. I announced that I was going to write something that would just express what I believed without worrying about who it would offend. Because I realized that I've always written for one audience or another. And in order to help one audience, you ignore some of the issues that may be important to you. And I just decided I would write what I really thought. It might offend everybody, but nevertheless, it made me feel better to get it off my chest, so to speak. And so I didn't write it as a curriculum, but Bonnie has great imagination and creativity. And so when she offered to turn it into a curriculum, I said, okay, fine, that's wonderful.
Well, yes, and this Living Earth movement began when John was preaching about love of enemies, which is an important teaching, perhaps the core teaching of Jesus, most important for this time, or one of them. And he wrote 2 letters to the president of China and the president of the United States. So, and I want to just offer I'm so inspired, Audrey, by what you're sharing, and David. There's something so international about both of you and your scope, as is there with this Living Earth movement and with John Cobb's work in the world. And it feels, I'm also reminded, here we are on Zoom talking with people from many different places. So I think the greatest thing that religion has to give us is community. All of the problems in our world, that this epidemic of alienation and loneliness is crippling us. So we desperately need to be in community during this planetary crisis. And a way to gather is to gather around prophets like John Cobb and his teaching, as well as the wisdom traditions like Jesus that have guided movements like the civil rights movement in Martin Luther King and Gandhi, who overturned the British Empire. So we have wonderful tools in faith communities and in wisdom traditions. And I hope this curriculum can harvest the teachings of Jesus as one tool for us to use and be an invitation for people to gather together as they do in all the religions, to study, to share, to love and care for one another, to go out and try to change the world and work together. So please join us, Church for a Common Home. We have these wonderful words by John Cobb. We will be test driving this curriculum beginning in August and September. You're welcome to join us in our very untraditional church, which is a Zoom church, but we worship with the animals in our barn. And we are trying to live out a more loving way to be with creation here on the John Cobb farm. So I feel very hopeful and so thankful for your beauty, Audrey, and for your leadership as a woman, particularly as a religious person. And I feel so heartened by being a part of the Living Earth movement that is a global movement. So we are acting locally, and we are also in community globally. So thank you, and I hope everyone will join us.
John and Bonnie will be leading a full session like this one for an hour and a half on August 25th, specifically about this curriculum and how to use it, and as it continues its evolution and further development. So please watch for the announcement of that and join that session as well. Thank you so much, Bonnie and John, for sharing about that. So now let's open it up to whoever would like to make a comment or ask a question, or just share your appreciation with David and Audrey for the presentations that they've given. And I see Jasmine Pichardo has her hand up. Please unmute. Yes, great.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. It's beautiful to be here in this space, and Spirit has led me here suddenly. So I know I'm supposed to be here with you all. And thank you, Audrey and David, Jeff, everyone, because I truly believe that even though we all have different ideas and values, we still have a common purpose, and it's to create a healthier and more loving way to be here on Earth, and a way to heal our Mother Earth, who does so much for us, every day, providing food and warmth and love and air. So yeah, I feel very grateful to be here. And as a young person, woman of color, I felt like I had to talk and share my voice. And I believe that we're creating a new Earth, a new way of being, where we could all recognize that we are the same. There's no difference between any human being. And we really need to dissolve and deprogram everything that we were taught that created the separation from each other, and this division in our universe, a whole planet, not just here. And I'm in the US. So my question would be, for you people that have been on this mission, on this purpose, where you share your voice and you share new ideas that maybe other people don't agree with or understand or might consider crazy. How do you stay in your center, in your core, in your truths? And how do you stay true to what you believe in your heart? I would love to hear from Audrey or David what you think about this, and how do you stay true to yourself?
Thank you so much, Jasmine. Jeff, if I may have the opportunity to respond. You raise a very important question, because that is a question that all of us seek answers to, and that is to be able to have the balance and not get pulled out by the polarizations and the challenges that are ever present with us in the world of creation. So, many years ago, I had the privilege and opportunity to meet a very enlightened person who I call my spiritual mother. And she said, no two minds are alike. And so that means that you are always going to be in this state of the polarizations, the dualities, and going back and forth between the happy, the sad, the good, the bad. But she said, in the silence is the power of God, so that we have to come within and to seek out those moments of silence so that we can be informed and grow in our self-awareness and understanding. And also, she said that everything in creation changes. And Lord Buddha also said that everything is impermanent. So we are all faced with the constant changes that are going on in the creative world. And so we have to come within. This is part of our spiritual journey, to have the discipline and to be able to find those ways in which we can seek our balance of quietude in our meditation, in our prayer, in our search for God, for the deeper meaning of life, the profound perennial questions that David posed. Why are we here? What is the meaning of life? And ultimately, this, my spiritual mother said to me, that our true purpose in life is God realization, the awakening to our eternal union with the divine creator of all there is, and that everything in life, in creation, changes. And our difficulty becomes, because when we take on form and structure, we identify with form and structure as the reality, and so arises self-interest, self-preservation, and the need for self-recognition, and all the ways in which David was talking about, basically the power dynamics that seeks through the egoic nature to establish itself in special ways that can often be played out in ways that are harmful to others. So the spiritual journey that we are all on is a journey of self-discovery. Just as science as a field of knowledge is a journey of discovery, the discovery of the natural laws. And, you know, my spiritual mother also said, there are the knowns and the unknowns, and how we really don't like to live with the mysteries of life and having unanswered questions, because it creates such tension in us. We always want to know the answer, to have the certitude. And yet we are in the state of perpetual discovery, the discovery and the awakening to ourself. But she also said, and I'm talking about self as capital S, but she also said, God is love. And I think therein is great peace to know that if the divine creator of all there is love, then all that proceeds from the creator of all there is love. So we can find a lot of comfort in those words. And of course, all the great teachers from the beginning of time have shared the importance of being able to develop ourselves into loving beings. And that truly is the spiritual journey that ultimately will allow us to come to that place within ourselves, that center point in which we can find ultimate peace and never seek to stray from it, because the essence of our being is love. And may we all be instruments of expressions of that love in action in every moment that we live, wherever we may be, and be able to see that in that action of love, there is that place of centrality within us that helps us to remain there always.
Sorry, thank you, Audrey. I see a couple of other hands up, and I know that there are a couple of other people I would like to invite to speak. We have about 15 minutes left, so I would ask that you keep your questions or comments to just a minute or so we can get as many people an opportunity to speak as possible, because we still have 138 people on the Zoom. So, all right, and I'd like to call on Ralph Singh.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you all my brothers and sisters, seen and unseen, and that's only by the limits of what Zoom can show us. This wonderful gathering of light. Jasmine, how can you ever question? Don't ever think that the darkness has any power over the light. That is the first illusion. And that there's never been a greater opportunity for, and I'm, in my white beard days, I can say the youth among us have never had a greater opportunity to spread their light and watch the darkness disappear. Baba, His Holiness Baba Versus, and he always said, don't waste your time. I mean, we challenge, but don't waste your time worrying about the darkness. Go create light and watch the Spirit dispel the darkness. So never doubt. And as Audrey said, just be a light generator in your meditation. It's not passive. I think so many of us think prayer and meditation is a passive practice. It's the most active active energy that we must harness for change, both within ourselves to ward off or overcome our own weaknesses, but we're also generating light, which is the Spirit working from each of us. So thank you all so much, David. Always a pleasure. Audrey, everybody.
Thanks, Ralph. And for anyone who might not be aware, you can use the reactions icon at the bottom of your Zoom window and then click on raise hand to let me know that you'd like to speak. And I'd like to go to Tusi Avigalio next.
Dave and Fran, good to see you again. It's been a while. I'd just like to make a comment reference regarding the structure and the nature of structure. I come from a voyaging culture. We are voyagers in the Pacific. So structure is very important to us. Getting back to the structure in reference to the comments that David made, current modern structures channel power to the top. So regardless of whether you're a government structure or a religious structure or a children's structure or a village structure, if that structure is designed in that manner, you can come there with a holistic attitude, but you got to function in the structure that automatically channels the energy. So it's no wonder that people that have a much more diffuse and holistic intuitions and attunements are hammered in that structure because that's the only structure they know. So they're marginalized, minimized, and oftentimes persecuted. Our voyaging vessels do not have a bow and a stern. They're designed so that the front could be the back could be the front. And so that's how we are able to sail circles around the great exploring Western ships in the Pacific, because we were going around in circles and how the hell they do that? Well, because we had a holistic perspective, and the designs and the structures we use are more diffuse and organic, not mechanically structured in a linear way. So what it did is our structures enabled us to diffuse the energies that we were born with and aligned, I think, in a very, very compelling way. It also gives us a different perspective between healing and curing. In the Western world, curing is removing all evidence of the disease. Well, healing to us simply means to be whole again. So in essence, you can be cured, but not healed. And we tend to confuse being healed as being cured, or being cured as being healed, when that's not it at all. So our structures in which we help to channel our energies need to be examined very carefully, because regardless of how pure your intentions are, you will be channeled through a structure that has enforced rules, regulations, policies, procedures, and norms. So anyway, thanks, Dave. Just my few coconuts I wanted to add to the basket.
That's so brilliant. I just want to note that, yeah, what you've touched on is the whole structural challenge that we have, that in a sense, all of our institutions have to be turned on their head so that we root power back into living communities. So I'll not say more, but that's thank you very much, and it's great to reconnect with you too. See, we've got to pick that up from where we left it off.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't see other hands up, so I'm going to call upon a few people who I think would be valuable to hear from. And first going to ask if Olive Beltran would like to speak. Olive is a leader of the United Methodist Women's Group in the Philippines. And the organization is very active around climate change and ecological justice there. So would you like to say something, Olive? You muted yourself.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you so much. And first of all, I have to commend everybody, especially David and also Audrey, for the message that we have heard for today. And if you remember, I invited this group and Dr. Cobb to be our speaker in the Philippines, March 31. That was after his birthday. I'm just interested to know when will be the curriculum will be finished so that we can use this also in our own place, because the Philippines, you know, is our environment is really destroyed due to some politicians and also companies that will go there and look for gold or for their aggrandizement. So I think this curriculum can help the women of the United Methodist Church to be conscientized and not only to speak against this these distractions, but to act on it. Maybe that will be included in the curriculum. I expect that Tar Walker and Dr. Jav. Thank you so much. That's all, Pastor Jeff.
Thank you, Olive. And I know that Dick Bunce is with us as well. And I wonder, Dick, if you would be interested in, Dick is a leader of the project of helping the city of Pomona, California live into its vision of becoming a compassionate community. And I wonder, Dick, if you could comment on how the congregations of various faiths have been involved in that process.
Well, it's the congregations local to Pomona, quite honestly, are just waking up to it. And I think we want to have a there that we can talk about. And so it's highly experimental for this area, certainly. And so we're working with a combination of grassroots organizations and organizations that are beyond the grassroots level, with people who are many of them are involved in congregations. And so we have to I think assume that they will be communicating back into their own churches. I know that to some degree that is true for me personally. I'm involved in a somewhat activist congregation, and there is a receptiveness to what we're doing in Pomona. I don't know that that's as true for some of the other activists in Pomona. I would like to see the connection of congregations to the work in Pomona, which is really an effort to help us become more of an ecological city or community than it is. So that's a whole important part of our work that we need to go at with real intention.
Thank you. And I see June Holt, you have your hand up.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, I have to unmute. Am I unmuted?
I did.
Okay,
unmuted.
thanks. I just wanted to comment in response to what Dr. Tusi said about how the systems of power that we enter into, how to navigating those systems of power and how they affect us and limit us and shape us and direct us. And I put in the chat a book from Dr. Rianne Eisler. She spent 7 years researching the effect of power, hierarchy, and domination systems and partnership systems, at contrasting them, their effects on our nervous system and on our humanity. And so it's really related to what Dr. Tusi said. So I thought I would share that for people. Hi, Dr. Tusi. Hi, David. Hi, Fran. Hi, everybody.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And if for those who may not have been following the chat, there are a lot of links that folks have posted in the chat. So if you have a chance, you might want to save the chat. And you can do that by just clicking on a little button at the bottom, the 3 dots at the bottom, and it'll save it to your computer. I don't know, Richard, do you see anybody else with their hand up?
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Okay.
I would just note briefly that I'm going to be doing a session with Rianne Eisler in about a month with one of Kurt Johnson's initiatives. And so Kurt may be able to let people know what the link is if they would like to hear Rand and I talk about the partnership versus domination.
Yeah, I'm just putting the link into the chat.
Good, excellent.
Thanks, Kurt.
Jeff, I did want to pick up on one thing. Olive did ask a question about the curriculum, and I know that there may not be, Bonnie may not be sure right now, but she did ask if there was any idea when that might be available. Bonnie, do you have a sense for about when you hope to maybe have something you could share with other people?
Yes, I posted in the chat, and hi, Olive. We are going to be working on it at Church for a Common Home for the next 2 months, August and September. So we ideally would like to have it ready by October, but we'll have to see. But please come and help us, Olive. We're going to be working on this together. So we'd love to have you join us.
And what day and time are you doing that, Bonnie?
Every Sunday through August and September, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And the link is on Church for a Common Home website, and that's in the chat.
Thank you. David or Audrey, do you have any final brief comments before we close?
Audrey, go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, David and Jeff, and to each and every person who is here online today for your presence, because I think this is a demonstration itself of civil society coming together to see how we can work together and move together this transformation to create the tipping point to address not only our environment, but all global challenges, because we are all sentient beings living on our one home. And this ability for us to cooperate with each other, we may not agree on ideology or on religious differences, but we can seek those goals that need to be addressed and learn the ways to work together to find solutions for the mutual benefit of all. So I think this has been a fantastic model that we are demonstrating here today, and may we continue to grow the movement, especially the Living Earth movement and all environmental movements that seek to help us turn around the trajectory of our own existential existence that is now a very real threat. And I know that together, because we love and care for each other, and we do love and care for our common home together, that we will be able to achieve many wonderful and great things, because the infinite potential of our own ability has been given to us in our lives. And all that potential is sacred and is meant to be expressions of the infinite beauty, abundance, complexity, and challenges that are given to us to tap way into our own creativity, to find solutions that become the expressions of that love for each other. So thank you so much for this privilege and opportunity to be with all of you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey and David, and for everyone who contributed to the rich conversation, and for everyone who participated today. And if you are not yet very familiar with the Living Earth movement, you can find out more, and you can also sign up to get involved and sign up for our mailing list at livingearthmovement.eco. That's ECO. And find a lot of information there. We have resources available about ecological civilization, and including David's paper and articles by John Cobb and John Perkins and others. So please go there and find information. And I look forward to hopefully seeing many of you next month for our next public gathering on August 25th.
Jeff, I thought Audrey and I are both going to have a closing comment.
Oh, I didn't know you had something else to share. Go ahead, David.
Yeah. 3 quick points. I love Jasmine's point, who noted that we're all human, and the differences that we have our identity conflicts around are basically distractions at this time. Got to find that common humanality and recognize that the differences are sources of creativity. They're not sources of we need to get beyond the idea that they're sources of conflict. I think there's also another foundational idea to me is that we're engaged in a process of creation emerging. And this is part of the spiritual understanding that it's not just getting back into our spiritual state, but we're in this physical experience for a reason, for the unfolding and exploration of spirit, and that has its own implications. The third one is the thing that we have repeated quite constantly throughout this, that our fundamental challenge institutionally and how we live and organize as humans is moving from the top-down flow of power to the bottom-up flow of power and creativity and life. So we're all human. Creation is unfolding. We are participants in that, and for that to work, the flow of power has to be bottom-up, recognizing everyone's contributions and everyone's creativity and power. So my final thoughts.
Thank you, David. And thank you, everyone, again. Be blessed, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Bye.
Bye.